everyone, blessings my beautiful souls, and today I'm back with another video. In this video I would like to share with you 10 tips to help you to build a much stronger, much more grounded and well-rooted into the proper foundations of tarot. So these are tips for those who are beginning their tarot practice, those who consider themselves to be beginners, and those who are in the early stages of their intermediate tarot practice. So the tips that I'm going to share with you today are quite juicy, quite tasty, so stick around and I will get straight into it. The first tip that I have for you today is to really get connected with the elemental attributes of the tarot. Now this is specific mainly to the minor arcana, although the elemental associations are still present within the majors, but that's a conversation for another time. So let's focus on the primary elements. These are earth, air, fire, and water, of course. So earth is pentacles, and it relates to material possessions, to resources in general. When I think of pentacles, I think resources. And resources can be anything from your home, your wealth, your employment, the way that you make money, and time. I consider time to be one of the most valuable resources in today's society. So I consider time as an aspect of earth. It can also represent health and family, home, your garden, your physical body, etc. So anything that feels very solid and real in your life, that is an earth experience. Then we have cups. Cups relates to your emotions, your emotional body, your emotional intelligence. It also relates to the dreamscape. It relates to your intuition. Because water is considered one of the conduit to the divine aspects, then it has this extra portal-like essence to it, and it can represent a little bit of a higher connection. So it can represent your psychic centers and your psychic powers and your psychic, attributes, the clairs, if you will. And so there are other aspects of water, like the rhythms of life, the push and pull of energy, the flow. When we think of water, I often think of flow. It can represent relationships and interpersonal connections where feelings are really heightened. And so water is a really beautiful, interesting, kind of dreamlike element. And so when I think of cups, you think of water, and it's important to come up with these understandings and these associations for each of the elements, of course. Then we move on to air. Air is invention, it's inspiration, it's communication, it's cognitive abilities, it's writing, it's innovation, it's technology, and so much more. When we think of air, we think of air in the sense of fresh air, cleansing, clearing element, the wind, and that kind of natural aspect. But air is so much more because it really does connect itself to the way in which we communicate, the way in which we think, the way in which we problem solve, and so much more. It really governs aspects of the mind when we think of air. So understanding that can be really quite important. Then of course we have fire. Fire is our passion, our courage, our sexuality, our sensuality, that fiery part of our personality. When we are angry, we experience fire. When we are at war with someone, we experience fire. When we are passionate and sexual and sensual with a person, we are experiencing fire. We think dance and movement and that physical aspect that really raises, our heart rate and gets the blood pumping. This is fire. Creativity is another aspect of fire that is very much a part of how we look at the fire element within the tarot, at the suit of wands. And so when it comes to fire, we think our creativity, the way that we present ourselves, the way in which people see us, that we're projecting that outer personality. When we are firmly in our fire element, we are typically like shining bright within our embodied self and really sort of radiating from that beautiful sacral center, that passionate, vibrant, confident center. And so when it comes to the elements within the tarot, it's really important to think about these associations prior to laying out the cards, to really get to that point of understanding, to understand how each of the elements are associated within the realm of tarot. And you may have your own experiences with these elements, creating your own associations. In fact, I find that it is terribly beneficial to sit down and really think about what the suit of Pentacles means to you. What does earth mean to you? What does water mean to you? What does air mean to you? What does fire mean to you? And then understanding beyond that, we have Pentacles and Cups as feminine, and air and or swords and wands as masculine. And so how does that sort of translate in your own mind? How do you feel about those things? So this is a great opportunity for you to sit down and meditate on this very topic, to sit down and journal your thoughts. What is air to you? What does swords represent to you? What does, wands represent to you? What does fire mean in your life? Where can you see it in your life? Same with cups and same with pentacles. Point out the areas in your life that you feel are ruled by the suit of pentacles and the suit of earth, and sit with that and have that little play, so that the next time when you lay out your cards, look at the predominant elements there and you will know exactly which element is ruling your reading and what element might be missing, what element might be in deficit in that reading, because that can also give you a better understanding on what it is that we need to involve within the context of a singular reading. Okay, now tip number 2 is embodying the tarot. Now, this might make you feel a little bit silly, but there's a little bit of merit to this. Have you ever heard of things like a power pose, where a person stands there kind of like Superman with their hands on their head or their arms outstretched like that? It breeds confidence, or it breathes confidence. It gets the energy in a person like feeling really a particular way. Well, the same can be done for the tarot. So if you have a look, and this is particular to the major arcana as well, because we have more embodied stances within the major arcana. This is not to say that it's not prevalent in the minor arcana, and you can do this for all the 78 cards if you wish. Court cards, when they're embodied, are particularly fun with this, but you can actively sit there and strike the pose. Now, like I said, this might make you feel a little bit silly, but when you're in this headspace, I want you to really connect with the archetype of the card whose stance you are embodying. So when you think of the High Priestess, or you think of the Hierophant, however it appears in the card or the deck that you are using, that's exactly the pose that I want you to strike. And when you're there, I want you to take 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 really deep breaths and really connect with the archetypal energetics of that card, with the meanings behind the major arcana or the meanings behind the minor arcana, starting with exactly what keyword first comes to mind when you step into the stance of the particular card whom you are choosing to emulate through your physical movements and your stance, right? So let's say you're stepping into the card of the Emperor. And I want you to really connect with the energy of the Emperor in your mind. How does it make you feel? What does the Emperor bring to mind? And as you are taking those deep breaths, I want you to breathe in the aspects of the Emperor and hold that pose for at least a minute. Just hold it and think in the mindset of the Emperor. And when you're done, grab yourself a notebook and write it all down. How did you feel? Like really, really genuinely feel. What kind of energy rose up in your body? Because you would be surprised at the information that you can gather just from this very simple, somewhat silly exercise. There is nothing wrong with playing around with the stances within the tarot, as silly as it may make you feel. And I'm one of those people, I think, oh, this is so stupid. But at the end of the day, if I can get around myself and sit in this space, I can really, really start to, it's almost like a conjuring experience. I can conjure the energy of the card whose stance I am adopting, and with it, the power, the archetypal energy, and I can push that as far as I want to go. I can walk around in my day with that energy firmly around me, and it can be a really, really interesting energetic experiment, especially if you are wanting to For example, tweak and sort of upgrade your psychic centers. Work with the High Priestess. If you are wanting to be sexual and seductive, work with the Empress energy. If you are wanting to step into a more authoritarian spiritual sense, a mentor of some kind, you might want to work with the energy of the Hierophant. If you want to get organized, if you want to be authoritarian, if you want people to respect you, step into the energy of the Emperor, and so on and so forth. It is a task that I encourage you to play with, no matter how silly it might make you feel. When you are there, you will see exactly what I mean. You will see how worthwhile this exercise is. Sit in it, sit in that space, copy the pose, breathe it in, let your mind open wide and start to gather the information that is coming to you. It's kind of a great opportunity to experience a little bit of a download, if you will. So there you have it. All right, well, tip number 3 is dream integration. Now, if you're anything like me, I'm not a person that really dreams quite often. Well, everybody does, obviously, but I sleep so deeply that when I wake up, I seldom have recollection of my dreams. But there will be times in which I have these really vivid dreams. I wake up and I have this recollection. What I like to do then is I like to look at my dreams, that recall aspect, through the lens of the tarot. Now, what symbolism is apparent in my dream that I can actively recall, and how can I connect that to a card within the arcana? Another way that you can work with dream interpretation is through symbolic imagery and that kind of thing, like really allowing a symbol to enter your mind. And one of the ways that I do this is by a little exercise that my grandmother taught me, which is the frame it exercise. I grab a frame. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, but just a frame, and I prop it up next to my bed on my bedside table. I put a card in there that I either want to work with, I want to try to get to know better or unpack a bit more, or perhaps it's a card that has been recurring for me within readings. So the concept of a stalker card, which is not a great term for a recurring card, but if you understand what I mean, you know what I mean. When a card keeps appearing over and over again throughout your reading, that is when I would grab it and I would put it in a frame and I would sit it on my bedside table. I would have a pen and paper. For me, it's a notebook because I'm a notebook person next to my bed, and I would honestly go to bed staring at it, think about it. Why is this appearing? Why is this card appearing? Why is this card appearing? And I would obsess over it a little bit at night. Obsess is a very strong word, but I would just really focus my energy on it. And then I would go to sleep and I would allow myself to just have that peaceful night's sleep. When I wake up, whatever dream I do recall, whatever experience I do recall, the headspace that I wake up in, I would consider that to be related to the card that is in the frame next to my bed. And then I would sit down and I would write it down, starting with my mood, starting with any aspects, any symbolism, anything that I can recall from my dream. The best way to do this is the very first moment you wake up in the morning, because the longer you're awake, the less you remember. That's at least my experience. I don't know if that's scientifically accurate for everybody, but if I wait too long to unpack a dream that I'm fortunate enough to recall the next day, because it doesn't happen often for me, then I want to write it down immediately. And because I'm the type of person that finds my motor skills don't kick in the morning, it's just not great. So I'll grab my phone and I'll voice record. I will do a sleepy voice dump on my phone, and then later on in the day when I'm cognitively more alert, I will sit down and I'll unpack what it is that I've said first thing in the morning and really look at the ways in which that can relate to the recurring card or the card that I want to connect with, the card that's in the frame next to my bed. This is a way to really step into the energy of a card, to really focus on the card and to allow it to work within that kind of subconscious dreamscape. If you are the type of person that experiences really vivid dreams, and this was one that's definitely going to work for you, but if you are like me, I would not necessarily rely on this exercise alone unless, of course, you have cause to do it. And for me, like I've said, it's because a card keeps reoccurring in my readings. And it's happened enough time, the reoccurring has happened enough time for me to go, what the hell's going on here? I need to know. I need to unpack this. I need to dig deeper. So there you have it. So tip number 4 is synchronicity and serendipity. Because the tarot is structured around symbolic imagery, symbolism, symbology, however you would like to refer to it as being, then when you are walking through life, this can be anywhere, in any mundane setting, in any dinner party that you're attending, dropping the kids off to school, going for a walk, it doesn't matter. Life is imbued with symbolism. Absolutely, utterly imbued with symbolism. However, the more conscious you are of the symbols emerging and unfolding in your life, the easier this exercise will be. So for instance, if you start to find yourself around ideas, for instance, the symbol of ideas, it could be a thought bubble that appears somewhere in your day. It could be somebody saying, I've had this fantastic new idea. It could be somebody literally putting their hair up with a single sword kind of pin. It could be so many different things. So many different things. It could be shapes in the clouds. It could be patterns on the pavement. It could be seeing something dangling from somebody's rear vision mirror. It doesn't really matter where you see it. The point is, if you are open to interpretation, if you are open to the concept of symbolism, if you are open to synchronicities as well, if you start to see that a question that you have posed to the universe, to your gods, guides, guardians, ancestors, to your tarot deck, if you are seeing that question reflected back at you in any way, shape, or form, it makes sense to pay attention to the symbolism of your day. So let's say you have woken up and you have cause to do a reading and you lay out your cards, however many that is, either spread or freeform, doesn't matter. You lay out your cards. You begin the interpretation. When I personally lay out my cards in the morning, I'm not looking for a complete interpretation. I'm doing that for a reflection. So I write out my initial thoughts, my initial interpretation, and I use every single card that I use as a story. The whole layout represents a singular story to me. And then at the end of my day, I go back and I see how that reflection was. I see if I can reflect back on that initial, interpretation. And 9 times out of 10, it's awesome. And it matches, you know what I mean? But when it comes to the symbolism that you see, everything in your day-to-day has meaning. This is not to say that omens are prevalent all the time, and this is not a way to step out of the arc of reality and into a much more psychic space, although you can, if you can safely do so. What I'm saying here is that within the physical world, there is symbolism aplenty, and that symbolism can be looked at, can be perceived in a particular way. And you can associate that symbolism back to the tarot. And it becomes especially interesting when you have a question on your mind and when you have an open reading sitting at home that you want to reflect back on. It can sometimes be very interesting if you're asking for direction, if you're doing a life mapping style reading, to sit there, throw out the cards, go, give me some direction. And then just wait for the magic to happen. Wait for the cards that you have laying out on your table at home to somehow reflect back at you throughout your day. And you might find that you've laid out, let's say you've laid out 7 cards, just 7 cards. No particular reason why I've chosen 7, but let's just say you have taken the time to lay out 7 cards. And each card has a little something to say. How do you know when one is speaking loudest? You go about your day and you see if it's reflected back at you in your day. So when you come back at night, you might find that the energy of, say, the 3 of Cups is reflecting back at you really strong, because throughout that day you've connected with friends, you've had a drink with a mate, you have laughed, you have played, you've connected with kindred spirits, you've received hugs. You might find that that is the card that is kind of overarching, that it's providing that overarching message throughout your reading, and it gives a reading a much more nuanced kind of energy. It is something that I find really fascinating. I tend to be a split deck reader. This might be for the more intermediate to advanced readers. I typically open most of my readings with a totally separate deck that is mages only, and that is the card that I use as my overarching energy. And so oftentimes what I see reflected back is that card that I have picked as my overarching energy card. And it gives me this sense of assuredness throughout my day that I'm really connecting with my reading. I'm really connecting with the arcana. So always keep an eye out for that symbolism and for those synchronicities. To see a card that you are personally working with in a reading reflected back at you through symbolism throughout your day is genuinely affirming and so worth trying out. All right, tip number 5 is magical mapping. And this is one that is perfect to the beginner, the absolute beginner. For this, you're going to need a pen and some sticky notes. That is it. You are going to pull out 78 sticky notes. You are going to write the name of each card within the 78 cards within the tarot. And you are just going to allow that to be. Put it up on a wall, put it up on a board, however it is that you would like to present this. You can even do this, if you wish, in a notebook. It might be more practical to do it in a notebook because it will consume less space. But either way that you go about it, I find sticky notes to be quite functional because I have ADHD and they pop a bit and they're brightly colored, so I remember them. And if I put them out in a space that I can constantly look at them, then I'm more likely to look at them. But that's just me. If I put it in a book and I fold it up, I'm like, oh, I might not ever open that book again. So that's just one for the neurodivergent people. That's a little tip. Now, what you want to do is sit and study the tarot as you normally would. Go through the books, look up a few YouTube channels, and figure out what the Fool means, the spirit in search of the experience, the leap of faith, you know, the energy of the Fool. What does that mean to you? And you are going to absorb an enormous amount of information when you do this. When you're studying, you absorb so much information. What I want you to write down on that one sticky note that is associated to the Fool is the one that comes from within. So for me, the Fool has always been the spirit in search of the experience. That is what I would have written on my Fool card, if you will, my Fool sticky note. And the more I start to unpack about the Fool, the more I start to learn it's upright, it's reverse, meaning if you want to work with reverse, I work with reversals, so it's relevant. I believe in the medicine and the madness of every tarot card. That's just me. It doesn't need to be you. We all have our own style, we all have our own approach, and we all have a way in which we like to do things, right? So when you start to really unpack and learn more and more the symbolism, understanding the nature of that symbolism, what it really, really means to you, write it down, make the notes, make those beautiful notes, start to build a catalog for tarot for yourself. And really start to think about each card objectively, realistically, in a grounded sense. The tarot is quite practical. Yes, there's an esoteric side to the tarot, but what you want is to be able to work with the tarot in a guiding capacity for life mapping and, you know, for that beautiful advice that we look for when we're shuffling our decks and, you know, reaching to the arcana for a bit of help, right? What you want is practical information written on those cards or in that notebook, however you go about this, right? The more practical, the better it will be for you. And I want you to be a collector, a little magpie, if you will. Collect all the information, all the keywords, all the symbolic association or the symbolism for the Fool card, for instance. Write it all down, jot it all down, write some little pictures, do a little doodle. Find an emoji image that relates to it. It doesn't really matter how you do it. The point is you want to start to super inform yourself on one card. And you will do this in whichever way your mood sways you. I am a non-linear person. My mind is pure chaos. And so I tend to start with the Fool and then I might jump to a totally different card. So I tend to look at where I am in life and what symbols, what experiences, what themes are appearing for me in life. And to get the best out of it, I start to look for the card that embodies or that represents where I currently am in my life, the themes that are prevalent in my life. And I look to that card to really deepen my understanding of it so that I can deepen my understanding of my own personal position. It's such... It never gets... It never gets. I never get tired of this exercise. I have hundreds of journals dedicated to this. Hundreds of journals. I have had post-it cards aplenty. I will never stop studying the tarot. As a tarot professional, I believe it's my responsibility. And because tarot is organic, constantly evolving, I will always look for new ways in which to look at a particular card. Because as our world changes, the tarot evolves with it. And so, it is my job to make sure that I'm getting the absolute most, the deepest understanding that I possibly can from each of the cards in context to how life is currently right now. That's my vibe. But this exercise is definitely something that the absolute beginner can do. You can start in a linear fashion. You can follow the concept of the Fool's Journey if you will. You can go like I would and go, okay, what are the themes that are prevalent in my life right now? Oh, I'm going through a heartbreak. Find the card. The Three of Swords will be there for you, my love. Find the card. Oh, I'm going through a situation at work. Find the card and start with that card right there. And then start to work around it. Start to work backwards. The prevalent themes that have been in your life, the ones that you can recall, and sit down and start to really unpack them. What is the main symbolism of each of the cards for you in your mind? What is the astrological association? What is the elemental association? What are the keywords? What are the upright keywords? What are the reverse keywords? What are the pop culture icons associated to a particular card? And what is the numerology? What is the Kabbalah? What can you gather for a particular card that is going to help you to really deepen your understanding of that card? Only you can know. So only you can decide what it is that you are going to record in your notebook or on your post-it note. And I want you to really honor the way in which you gather information. It doesn't matter how you do it as long as you're gathering that information. All right, number 6 is archetypal activation. Now, this is probably one for those who are a little bit comfortable with the concept of archetypes and tarot. So, archetypes are quite present in the very beginning of your tarot journey, but it'll take you a minute to get there. So let's just say you are halfway in your beginning tarot practice or your beginner tarot practice, more to the point. So this is a way to experiment with the push and pull of energy with the arcana and the way in which you personally embody aspects of the tarot. So it's a fun little exercise. Play it with your friends, play it on your own, play it with your cat, your dog, doesn't really matter. But the point is, by connecting with a archetypal energy of a particular card within the tarot, doesn't matter which one, could be a major, could be a minor, could be a court card, it doesn't matter. Pick one, study it, try to connect with the archetypal energy. If you cannot, move on to another card. The important thing is to connect with that archetypal energy. Really understand the concept of an archetype when it comes to the tarot and connect with that. Embody it, sit into it. Really deepen that experience for yourself. Sit in that power, that archetypal power. Pick a card that fascinates you, that you love, that you adore, and then sit in that archetypal energy. This is really fun with the court cards. I'm not saying that you need to do it with the court cards. It's just fun, okay? Once you have it, you are going to conduct a tarot reading in the archetypal space of the card that you are embodying, and see how your style differs. See how the energy of that archetype can really transform the way in which you read your tarot, you approach your interpretations. See how it affects your understanding of each of the cards. See how your reading develops, full stop, by stepping into a particular archetype that you feel drawn to. This is like costume play. It's like cosplay, but for energy, arcana energy to be specific. So when we step into an archetype, it's like we are wearing almost like the skin of a particular card and really sitting in the power of that card. And I want you to play around with conducting a reading. And you can do this in an imaginary sense. You can sit there and write out a client profile, if you will, and then conduct a reading. Sit with it, interpret it, and see what it provides you with. See how it makes your readings feel. Tip number 7 is storytelling, okay? This is great for group environments. So if you and some friends are all interested in tarot, this is a fantastic one to do. Grab your deck, shuffle it up, pull a card, and begin the storytelling. So all you're doing is, rather than interpreting, rather than really getting down into the nitty-gritty of the symbolism and all that is, look at the picture. Look at the card image. What is it telling you? And begin your story. Once upon a time is how you're going to do it. The next person going to draw a card and continue on with that story. This is a fantastic way to start to learn to build a reading. Okay, so a reading isn't just one card. A reading is many cards. A reading is nuanced. A reading has twists and turns, has a few curveballs. The idea here is to learn to create flow within your tarot practice, and storytelling can be perfect for that. Likewise, if you don't have friends and you don't want to do this with anyone else, what I suggest you do is grab your deck, shuffle it, open your mind, don't set any intentions, and lay out 3 cards and start to do the storytelling that way. Believe it or not, whether you are intending to do it or not, your mind will absorb what it needs to from each of the cards, symbolically speaking. And you might find that at the end of your 3-card draw and your storytelling experience, you actually have yourself a really great little reading that has somewhat of a nuanced energy to it. And so, storytelling with the tarot can be one of the best, most creative approaches to learning more about your cards, to really absorbing your cards. It's an unfortunate side effect of tarot study that we become fixated on the symbolism of each of the cards, on the elemental associations, the numerology, etc. And sometimes we overlook the art present in each of the cards, especially if we are looking at pictorial cards, like is present in the Rider-Waite-Smith or any Thoth-based system for that matter. And so what you have here is an opportunity to take the art and your understanding of the card and smush it together. Smush it. Sandwich it together. How about that? And so, storytelling with the tarot, absolutely beautiful, absolutely brilliant, and really gets you looking at the art of the tarot. And let us face it, art is a fundamental component to the arcana. If you are working, like I said, with the Rider-Waite-Smith or the Thoth systems, art is vital. It's paramount to the reading experience. You can know analytically anything about a card, but if you're not taking into consideration the art that is present, how the character is depicted, the colors that are present, how that affects your mood, etc., then you're not getting everything that you can possibly get from a card. So storytelling gives you the opportunity to connect with the art that is present within the cards, and that will add even more layering, even more information to your repertoire. Tip number 8 is symbolic synthesis, okay? We've talked a little bit about symbolism as prevalent in our day-to-day lives, our natural world, but this takes things a little bit further. Now, I've previously stated that the tarot has its esoteric roots, and whether you work with the tarot in an esoteric, spiritual, mystical capacity is neither here nor there. The point is, within a great many tarot decks, you are going to see traditional historical symbolism prevalent. Okay, that could be a great many things. Now, thank God for the internet, because when there is a symbol that you consistently see in the world, it's important to understand that symbol. Whether you use it or not, whether you're ultra interested in it or not, it's really, really interesting to build up a bit of a symbolic library in your own mind. You don't have to research symbolism in any kind of capacity, but understanding why something is a symbol, how it became a symbol, what culture a particular symbol has, come from, is quite handy when working with the arcana, when working within the context of tarot, when going through tarot books, when looking at the symbolism in the Rider-Waite-Smith or the Thoth deck alone, you are going to be able to unpack a great many symbols. And so, looking at symbols that are prevalent in today's society, that are all around us, looking at historic symbolism, looking at esoteric symbolism, looking at magical or occult symbolism can be very, very beneficial to your tarot practice. This is not to say that you need to become a student of the occult, but when it comes to symbolism, symbolism is the hidden language. The more symbols you know, the more symbols you kind of understand. You don't have to thoroughly integrate these symbols into your life, but knowing what they are, what they represent, and what cultures they come from is both respectful, and it will add dimension to your tarot brain. And so it's worth looking at the symbolism within the tarot, because you are going to find that sometimes, this is especially true for Rider-Waite-Smith decks, symbolism is repeated over and over again. The pentacle, for instance, typically is the symbol for Earth. The star is typically the symbol for Earth, the pentacle. That is what it means. Now, it used to be that Earth was once called coins, or pentacles was once called coins, and in some decks it still is. And some tarot professionals and authors alike still refer to the pentacles as coins. That is neither here nor there. The point is the symbolism that is associated to each one, the symbolism that is associated to swords, the symbolism that is associated to cups and wands, the symbolism that's hidden behind it. There is so much to symbolism and the tarot. And the more you sort of dig deep into this, the more you will come to understand. There is a great argument between swords and fire. Or swords and wands, I should say. Swords and wands. Why is swords air and wands fire? Why? Shouldn't it be the other way around? A sword is forged in fire. Why does it symbolize air? And why does the wand that one waves around in the air symbolize fire? Look into that. In fact, if you don't believe me as to how important symbolism is to your tarot, I want you to research that for yourself. Look into it, and you're going to quickly understand why it is the way that it is, what the argument might be, and all the information that surrounds just that alone. So symbolism is incredibly important to tarot. Tarot is a symbolic language in and of itself. So the more you understand complex occult symbolism or basic symbolism like the Hamza or the peace sign or an emoji for all that matters, the better off your ability to interpret, especially the art, will be. When you start to see the figure 8 in the strength card, for instance, what does that mean to you? What does that really mean in context to the card? So understanding these embedded symbols is incredibly important, and it helps you to open up your understanding of the cards. Tip number 9 is creative play. You don't have to be an artist to play creatively with the tarot. You can really sit down with your coloring pencils, your art supplies, your paints, be it what it may, and you can start to play around with the concept of a card. And you don't have to be an amazing artist to do this. It really is symbolism, it's color, it's movement, it's flow, it's energy that you're creating. When it comes to that creative element within the tarot and really looking at that creative kind of play that we can engage in when it comes to tarot, I think it's really important to let yourself free. Tarot journaling is one of the most beautiful ways in which you can do this. Now, tarot journaling, typically people think of journaling as writing, and absolutely, tarot journaling can be a lot of writing. But tarot journaling can also be tarot art journaling. And it can be drawing a box, painting colors, adding symbolism, playing around with concepts that just pop out of you, that just flow out of you. It's really important in this space to be non-judgmental about what it is that you are doing. Far too many of us think very rigidly, whereas when we were children, painting and art came very naturally. We had no restrictions. We placed no restrictions on ourselves, and we drew and we painted, and we did so with whimsy and abandon. And that's exactly the experience or the headspace that I want you to be in when you tarot journal, when you creatively play with the tarot. So get out your art supplies. Do this with your kids. If you are a parent and you have the opportunity to sit by children and watch how they work with their coloring in pencils and their paints and their little stickers and all of that kind of good fun stuff, then you're halfway there. If not, go on YouTube, look at artists, look at watercolor artists or journal artists, and start to pull a little bit of inspiration. Don't compare yourself, pull inspiration, okay? Inspiration is important to this experience, and that is all you need to do. My doggy's over there trying to get my attention. And so this is an opportunity, an invitation, if you will, to play with the artistic components of the tarot. Because, like I've previously said, tarot art is vital to the tarot experience. We are literally looking at visual objects when we're looking at a tarot card. It's a visual object. It is a material visual object. So learning to play around with art and tarot and include the tarot in your art, you might be able to hyperfixate on a symbol like the 8 in the strength card and do that in a really beautiful way. And as you're doing it, it can become a bit of a meditation, if you will. This is free play. This is coloring outside the lines. There are no parameters to this. There are no rules to this. It is all about you and how you wish to express yourself. And believe it or not, those that like to sit there in creative space and tarot journal and art journal with the tarot always get that little bit more out of their tarot practice. They always do, because they're spending time creatively with the tarot. And that's super, super important to becoming a really well-grounded tarot reader. And my last tip is to add a touch of magic to your tarot practice. Now, depending on who you are and what your own natural proclivities might be, add a little ritual, add a little magic, add a dusting of magic, if you will. The way that I do this is I have an altar. I'm a bit witchy, so I have an altar. I have crystals and candles and oils and incense and symbolism and objects on my altar where I read tarot. But you don't need to be like me. You can have a vase of beautiful candles. You can have a cup of water, if you will. It doesn't really matter how you do this. Adding a little bit of magic to your tarot to help to shift the energy. One thing that I like is the aspect of ritual. I do things a particular way when I read tarot. And I do things that way because it helps me to get in the right headspace. This is not to say that I can't just grab my deck, shuffle, and do a reading. That's not what it's about. Shuffling in itself is a way in which I get in the mood to read tarot, but that's not the most important thing. Setting up ritual, having a special tea when you're drinking, that you drink when you're reading tarot, or burning a particular incense stick or making your own incense to burn on coals could be your thing, or lighting a particular colored candle each and every time you do a reading, or grabbing yourself a hydrosol and putting on a little bit of essential oils, burning something in your space. It doesn't matter how you choose to do this. It might be tying your hair back, taking your jewelry off, taking your shoes off, putting on some warm socks, crossing your legs, and sitting before you read. Having these little rituals brings that sense of magic and mystery to the tarot. It means that you are serious, that you are focused, that you are collecting yourself prior to the reading. I find that practices that are grounding and centering in their results are really great to practice when you are preparing to do a reading. Knowing some solid breath work and understanding how to shift the mood to do a reading is all part of being a great tarot reader. It's knowing how to put someone else at ease. It's knowing how to involve someone else's energy in your tarot practice. And to do that, you need to be very sure of your own energy to begin with. So when we are setting ourselves up for a reading, find a way in which you can do that that makes you feel most comfortable, most at ease. Ritual can be really fun. It can be really simple. Ritual does not need to be religious in any way. It can simply be the succession in which you do specific things each and every time. And that's what's beautiful about it. Being able to design a little ritual surrounding your own tarot practice will really enhance the way you approach the cards or the headspace you find yourself in when you are sitting with the cards. And when it comes to tarot ritual, the more you practice tarot, the more your rituals will change. And the more you can, here's my puppy, and the more you can adjust the parameters of your ritual. Ritual doesn't need to be complicated. Ritual doesn't need to be fancy. You don't need headscarves and costumes or anything like that. You can have a crystal, you can have a candle, and you can have yourself and a deck present with you. It comes down to you and who you are and what it is that you are aiming to get from your tarot practice. I happen to love ritual. I find that having a dedicated space in which I do my readings really helps me. It gives me that environment. When I sit down in front of my reading table, I get this nice feeling. I know why I'm there. I know what's going to happen. Everything is as I have made it. And I've created the environment that I enjoy when I am reading tarot. So that is all I'm asking you to do, is to dust your practice with a little bit of magic. Create the environment if you have the opportunity to do so. Not everyone has the means of creating a tarot altar or a dedicated reading space. If you do, congratulations, that's wonderful. Make that incredible for yourself. If you don't, you might like to put your tarot decks in a little bag, have a little something with that. Might wrap your decks in silk. You might keep your decks with a crystal. You might have a particular reading cloth that you use each and every time you lay out your cards. It doesn't really matter what you have to work with, as long as you are being thoughtful with how it is that you work with the elements that are provided for you or available to you. So don't be frightened to add a little bit of magic. A little spoken word mantra prior to your reading, a little dance, a little stance, a little magical tea. It doesn't really matter how it happens. Add some magic to your tarot practice, because at the end of the day, tarot is so special. It is such an incredible tool. It deserves a little something extra. It deserves a little pomp, a little ceremony, if you will. That's just my opinion, of course, to each their own. I'm not forcing ritual onto you. Work with the tarot in whichever way makes you feel amazing and makes the tarot feel more meaningful to you. For me, ritual is an enormous component of that. Having my space is an enormous component to the way that I choose to read my decks, or my readings, or work with my decks, I should say. That came out really complicated, but I'm sure you know what I mean. And with all of that said and done, my beautiful souls, I'm wishing you so much love, luck, peace, and joy. I hope that you've enjoyed my 10 tips. And if you have any questions or anything to add to anything that I have said within this video, leave a comment below. I would love to hear from you if there are any tips and tricks that you would like to offer up to the beginner. And let's get a nice little conversation going. In the meantime, take care of yourself. Happy shuffling. I'll chat to you again soon. Mwah. Bye.